The following content is a narrated account intended for storytelling and discussion.
Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I never thought a campfire could start a war, but when my family lit one on our own land, we became targets of a furious HOA across the lake. Drones, lawsuits, and viral videos followed. They tried to silence us. Instead, we lit a fire no one could put out. I never thought I'd have to defend my family's right to roast marshmallows on our own land, but life has a twisted sense of humor. Every year, like clockwork, we pack up our gear, leave the phones inside the house, and walk the half-mile down to the lakeshore on the southern edge of our property. 20 acres of Oregon forest, half of it still untouched since my grandfather bought it back in the 50s. And right there at the bottom, the lake. No Wi-Fi, no electricity, just tents, trout, and a good old-fashioned fire pit dug into the dirt by my own hands. That's our yearly ritual. No interruptions, just us, the trees, and whatever local wildlife felt like passing through. This year was no different. My wife Kate had already claimed her spot near the water, setting up our makeshift camp kitchen. The kids, Ella and James, were bickering over who got to pitch the main tent. I was content just hauling gear and pretending I didn't hear them. That's the beauty of this spot. No neighbors, no traffic, no HOA. At least, not on our side. Across the lake, though, that was another story. On the far shore, a series of freshly constructed homes line the bank like oversized dollhouses, neatly trimmed lawns, white Adirondack chairs, and driveways that sparkled like someone polished them for a magazine shoot. That was Silver Pines, a gated community that popped up about 5 years ago after a tech developer bought the old logging land and turned it into luxury real estate with a private lakefront aesthetic as part of the pitch. But they never bought the lake. And they sure as hell didn't buy my land. We'd had no problems before. Not until that evening when I was squatting beside the fire ring, stacking dry pine branches, trying to coax a flame out of damp tinder. The sun had just dipped low enough to cast the whole lake in amber, and the kids were chasing each other barefoot across the pine needle floor. Then came the voices, clipped, sharp, and entirely unwelcome. "Excuse me, sir." I stood up slowly, brushing ash off my hands, and turned toward the tree line where the trail curved down from the main road. Two figures approached, a man and a woman, both wearing laminated badges around their necks that swung with every furious step. The woman got there first, arms crossed, gaze locked on our fire like it was a felony in progress. "You can't have open flames here," she said flatly. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "This is community shoreline," the man added, gesturing vaguely toward the lake. "No camping, no fires. It violates HOA Ordinance Section 4.1. Kate looked up from her camp stove. "We're on private land." The woman pulled a tablet from her satchel like she was about to read me my rights. "This shoreline is within Silver Pines Visual Compliance Zone. That fire is visible from several lakefront properties. So are the tents. You'll need to pack up and move." I actually laughed. "You're telling me I can't camp on my own property because someone might see a tent?" The man frowned. "It's about preserving property values." Kate stood up slowly, camera already recording. She's faster than me with that sort of thing. "I'm Lucas Gray," I said, taking a step forward. "This is my land, 20 acres, legally surveyed, purchased outright. This section here," I pointed at the campsite. "My grandfather fished from this spot before your HOA was even a concept in some suburban planner's daydream." The woman didn't flinch. "That may be, but we're enforcing the standards agreed upon by the Silver Pines community." "Great," I said. "Then go enforce them on Silver Pines land." The man's jaw clenched. "We're calling the sheriff." Kate didn't miss a beat. "Please do." I gestured toward our cooler. "You want a soda while we wait?" They didn't answer. They turned and stormed back up the trail, muttering something about non-compliance and visual violations. I watched them disappear through the trees, then turned back to the fire. Kate kept recording until they were out of sight. The kids, blissfully unaware of the HOA patrol, asked if we could do s'mores early. I told them yes. By the time night fell, the fire was going strong. The marshmallows were perfectly burnt, and we could just make out the faint glow of porch lights across the lake. Silent, sterile, and identical. Let them look. I wasn't going anywhere. The sheriff's deputy arrived just as the morning mist began to lift off the lake, his cruiser rolling slowly down the gravel road that cut through our property like it wasn't sure it belonged there. I was standing barefoot by the water, sipping Campfire coffee out of a dented tin mug, when I heard the crunch of tires. Kate was still asleep in the tent, and the kids were off somewhere in the woods chasing frogs or building traps for each other. I didn't wake anyone. Something told me this was going to be short. The deputy stepped out, mid-50s mustache, mirrored sunglasses, and the tired gait of a man who'd been called to one too many HOA disputes. He wasn't alone. Another car had pulled up behind him, and out stepped her. The queen of the clipboard herself, Karen Morrison. I didn't need an introduction. I'd seen her type before. Efficient haircut, rigid posture, and a face that carried the weight of someone who believed firmly that the world was supposed to obey her calendar. She carried a slim black binder tucked under her arm like a legal sword. "Mr. Gray," the deputy said with a polite nod. "Mind if we talk for a minute?" "Not at all," I said, motioning toward a tree stump. "You want a seat? Or is this going to be a stand-up kind of chat?" Karen ignored the pleasantries and got right to it. "This property is currently in violation of multiple ordinances under the Silver Pines Homeowners Association bylaws," she said, flipping open her binder like it was a holy book. "Open flame within visual radius, temporary structures not approved by the Community Standards Board, and non-compliant landscape disruption." I blinked. "Non-compliant what?" "The tents," she said without missing a beat. "They visually disrupt the harmony of the lakeside environment." I turned to the deputy. "Is this why you're here?" He looked tired, not annoyed, not angry, just like a man stuck in the middle of a war he didn't sign up for. "Got a call," he said. "Claim of unauthorized fire and encampment on HOA-regulated property." "Yeah, about that," I said, walking over to the folding table we'd set up near the trees. I pulled a folder from my backpack and handed it to him. Inside were survey maps, deed records, and a county-approved land plan from 2 years ago, with my name on every square inch. "You'll see the property line extends 20 feet into the lake. This entire campsite, solidly inside my boundaries. I don't belong to any HOA." Karen stepped forward. "There's a community easement." "Nope," I cut in. "No easement. I had this checked before I bought the place. Triple checked. Your HOA begins at the other side of the lake and ends where the water begins." She opened her mouth to respond, but the deputy held up a hand. "Ma'am, let me take a look here," he said, stepping a few feet away to study the documents. I took a deep breath and watched her watch me, eyes narrowing like she was mentally scanning every visible inch of my land for crimes against aesthetics. From the tent, Kate emerged, bleary-eyed, camera in hand, already recording. Karen turned toward her. "There's no need to film." Kate smiled. "Disagree." The deputy returned a moment later, clearing his throat. "Well," he said, flipping through the final page, "everything appears to be in order. The campsite's within your boundaries, Mr. Gray. There's no legal violation here." Karen looked like she'd just been asked to swallow a porcupine. "This is community-adjacent land. Our residents paid for—" "It's private land," the deputy interrupted, with the calm finality of someone who'd heard enough. "And you called this in as a public safety violation. Since there was no violation, that could be considered misuse of emergency services. You're threatening to fine me." Her voice hit a sharp pitch that echoed across the lake. "Not a threat," he said. "Just informing you. False reports are a Class A misdemeanor in this county. You're lucky we're not bringing the chief out here." Karen clutched her binder tighter, like it might shield her from the embarrassment. Kate, still filming, took a slow pan of the deputy, the tents, the placid lake, and then zoomed in on Karen's frozen expression. Karen took a step back. "This isn't over." "It is for today," I said. "Enjoy your lakeside view." She turned on her heel and stormed back up the road, high heels clacking like gunshots on the gravel. The deputy gave me a long look. "Just try not to poke the bear too hard," he said quietly. "Wasn't planning on poking anything," I replied. "Just camping with my family." He nodded, got back in his cruiser, and disappeared into the trees. Kate lowered the phone. That recording just made itself. I thought, maybe, just maybe, that would be the end of it. They came, they saw, they lost. Logic prevailed. The sheriff had shut it down clean. But anyone who's ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA knows that logic has absolutely nothing to do with how these people operate, especially not Karen Morrison. The next morning started like any other on our campsite. I was filleting a trout James had caught just after sunrise. Ella was braiding daisy chains and telling the kind of 8-year-old stories that don't have real plots, but still require total attention. Kate was boiling coffee on the fire grate and scrolling through her phone. She looked up with that same sideways grin I've known for 15 years. "Your fame is growing," she said. 50,000 views overnight. I raised an eyebrow. "That many people care about tents and a fire pit?" Kate tilted the screen. There it was. The video from yesterday. Karen getting told off by the sheriff. The comments were rolling in faster than she could read them. Apparently, HOA horror stories struck a deep national nerve. Then came the sound. A low rumble growing louder. Music. At first I thought maybe someone on a boat, but it was coming from across the lake, from Silver Pines. And it wasn't just music. It was a full-on outdoor audio assault. Blaring from mounted speakers along the HOA shoreline came some god-awful instrumental version of "My Heart Will Go On." Then, without warning, it jumped into a thumping remix of "Sweet Caroline," echoing across the water like we'd camped next to a wedding DJ with brain damage. I stood slowly, shading my eyes. Over on the opposite shore, I could see them. A row of Silver Pines residents, some in bathrobes, some with binoculars, sitting smugly on their decks like they were watching dinner theater. The speakers were lined up on Karen's lawn, pointing directly at us. One of her neighbors even held up a sign. "No campers," Kate groaned. Passive aggression in surround sound. Ella cubrió sus orejas. "Dad, make it stop." "I'd love to, sweetheart." But the fun didn't stop there. As I walked down toward the lakeshore to assess the line of sight, something buzzed past my ear. A drone. It zipped back, hovered, and then dipped low, too low, over our tents. I could hear the high-pitched whine of the rotors shifting as it adjusted to follow movement. James threw a pine cone at it. "Get lost, you robot perv." The drone backed off a few feet, but kept hovering, now fixed over the kid's tent. That's when Kate's expression went from annoyed to furious. She pulled out her phone again and started filming. "Get the serial number if you can," she said. "I want that thing identified." "Don't worry," I said. "I've got an idea." I walked over to my truck, which I'd parked just up the hill, and pulled out the emergency fire shelter I kept from my old job. I hadn't planned on using it for privacy, but here we were. I stretched it over a small clothesline between two trees and told the kids to stay underneath it for now. Then I went digging for our cooler lid, reflective side up, and aimed it skyward like a cheap anti-aircraft system. The drone jerked in place, then finally retreated across the lake. And just when we thought we'd earned a moment of peace, a new voice tore through the still air. A megaphone. "Oh, come on," Kate snapped. From the HOA side of the lake, a man in golf shorts and a visor, standing in his manicured backyard, lifted a bright red megaphone to his lips. "This is private community viewshed. You're violating the agreement." I cupped my hands to my mouth. "I don't live in your community." "Then go back to whatever trailer park you crawled out of." I stepped forward, biting back the urge to remind him that I had more land than his entire development combined. Kate's phone was still rolling. An hour later, the video was up. Drone footage, megaphone threats, musical harassment. Titled simply, HOA War on Family Camping. It took off even faster than the first one. By sunset, the comments were flooding in. People shared their own stories, their HOA horror tales, their support. Someone even offered to donate a drone jammer. We didn't leave the campsite. Not for a minute. They were trying to annoy us into submission. But if there's one thing 30 years as a firefighter taught me, it's how to stay calm in smoke. And this place was starting to smell like escalation. By the next morning, the videos had reached over 100,000 views. Local reporters started reaching out to Kate through direct messages. A regional news blog wrote a quick blurb about the lakefront camping conflict, calling it a classic Oregon standoff between private property rights and HOA overreach. That was flattering, sure, but the only thing I cared about was whether my kids could roast marshmallows without being buzzed by surveillance drones or serenaded by HOA karaoke. At dawn, I was up again, prepping breakfast over the coals. Kate was sitting beside me, scanning her phone with that familiar face she made when reading something simultaneously ridiculous and infuriating. "They just posted a statement," she said, from the official Silver Pines HOA account. "Let me guess," I said. "They're the real victims now," she read aloud. "We are dismayed by the hostile and disrespectful behavior of an adjacent landowner who refuses to respect the shared visual serenity agreed upon by Silver Pines residents. Our attempts at peaceful resolution were met with provocation, illegal structures, and media manipulation. I barked a laugh so hard I nearly burned the bacon. Media manipulation. We filmed them threatening to sue us for having tents. Kate didn't laugh. It gets better. They're calling it a viewshed incursion. A viewshed what now? Apparently, it means you're polluting their sightlines with your campfire and family. Well, if they hate the sight of us that much, they can just look the other way. But they weren't looking away. They were doubling down. That afternoon, a shiny black SUV pulled up near the entrance of our property. I walked up cautiously, and out stepped a man in a blazer and loafers so clean, I doubted he'd ever walked on dirt in his life. He introduced himself as Victor Denton, legal counsel for Silver Pines HOA. He handed me a large manila envelope and said with an oily smile, "Just a courtesy. The HOA is preparing to file for injunctive relief to prevent unauthorized activity on or adjacent to the lakefront." I stared at him for a beat. "You know this is private land, right?" "Your actions are impacting our community," he said. "We have documentation. You'll see that in the letter." I opened it. Their claim was built around a made-up policy about visual harmony jurisdiction, not a real legal term, and cited 3 supposed community resolutions passed at HOA board meetings, none of which applied to non-members. They were threatening to file for an emergency injunction if we didn't cease disruptive activity immediately. Kate, who'd come up behind me, asked, "Did you just drive out here to deliver a fairy tale in a folder?" Victor blinked. "Excuse me?" "None of this is real," she said. "This is a performance. You people are desperate." Victor gave a polite cough. "We'll see how desperate we are when this reaches the county court." "Perfect," I said, folding the letter in half. "We were about to go there anyway." He left without another word. That evening, I called Carol Edwards, my property rights attorney, and emailed her everything. The drone footage, the megaphone incident, the legal threat, and the HOA's online statement. She responded less than an hour later with one word: delicious. The next day, she filed a preemptive motion, notice of intent to sue, citing harassment, trespassing by aerial surveillance, false police report, attempted coercion, and defamation. Carol wasn't subtle. She copied the HOA board, their counsel, and the county clerk. She also included screenshots of the HOA's public claims, annotated with legal commentary like a professor grading a paper written by a very stupid student. As if on cue, local news finally bit. A van from Channel 8 rolled up during lunch. The reporter, a young woman with a bright windbreaker and a voice like she was born to say, "Back to you in the studio," interviewed us beside the fire pit, while James showed the camera where the drone had hovered. "We've camped here for years," I told her. "This land's been in my family since before any of those houses were built. Now we're getting threatened for roasting marshmallows." Kate added, "They're trying to make us look like squatters on our own property. It's absurd. And, frankly, creepy." That night, the segment aired. The headline read, "Lakefront HOA accused of harassment over family camping." The backlash was immediate. Online forums lit up. Local Reddit threads exploded. People started digging into Silver Pines HOA. And sure enough, someone found a gem. 2 years ago, the HOA had tried to claim shoreline usage rights over a completely unrelated neighboring parcel and lost in court. The ruling: no jurisdiction over non-member property, regardless of line of sight. It was exactly the precedent we needed. The internet wasn't on our side anymore. It was sharpening its knives for Karen. By the time Friday rolled around, I was starting to feel like we'd accidentally triggered a small war. Our lakeside retreat had officially turned into a battleground for property rights, HOA overreach, and whatever fragile sense of control Karen Morrison thought she had over the visible world. The videos Kate had posted now totaled more than 250,000 views, and Channel 8's segment had made the regional news cycle. Strangers were emailing offers of support. One guy in Montana wanted to mail us a hand-carved Campfire Freedom Zone sign. Another sent drone jamming tips. But while the internet laughed, Silver Pines HOA wasn't done playing dirty. That morning, I caught a movement out of the corner of my eye. A man standing on the far side of the lake, on Karen's dock, holding up a laminated sign. Kate zoomed in with her phone and read it aloud. "Violator alert. This camp is a threat to community safety and order." The sign had our names on it. Full names, spelled correctly. Kate's face turned white. Then the harassment escalated. A Facebook group popped up. protect Silver Pines from squatters. Their first post claimed that we were squatting illegally, conducting open fires in fire-restricted zones, and refusing to vacate land adjacent to a protected community. They included a blurry photo of me shirtless at the fire pit. That was fun. The group had over 200 members within 24 hours, mostly HOA residents, their relatives, and a few concerned retirees who clearly had too much time and not enough fact-checking ability. They shared rumors, fake maps, even an altered property survey that showed my land possibly intersecting HOA lake boundaries. Total fiction. Carol, our lawyer, was already working overtime. She compiled screenshots, pulled the original court ruling from 2 years ago, the same one where the HOA had tried this stunt before, and began drafting an amended complaint that added defamation, digital harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. But the real breakthrough came from a stranger. A user named @ShorelineDad1971 messaged Kate anonymously and sent her a zip file. Inside were PDFs of Silver Pines HOA meeting minutes, somehow obtained, likely leaked, including one particular document dated just 2 months prior. Subject line: Expansion of Visual Compliance Zone. In the minutes, Karen had proposed an internal resolution to monitor and, if necessary, enforce aesthetic regulations on adjacent properties visible from the lakeside residences, citing campers, old fencing, and improper lawn care as threats to community harmony. The proposal had been approved internally but never filed with the county because it had no legal basis. They'd created an entire system of fake authority. Kate stared at the screen for a long time. They've been planning this. They wanted to go after anyone they could see. Not anymore, I said. We handed the file to Carol. She practically sang through the phone. Later that day, something strange happened. A white envelope arrived in our mailbox, hand-delivered. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No header, no signature, just a typed sentence. Don't push this any further. You're making enemies. I showed it to Kate. She didn't say anything at first. Then she grabbed her phone and began recording a new video. This is for the HOA. And Karen, she said, staring directly into the camera. You don't scare us. You don't control us. You don't own this land, and you never will. Keep pushing, and we'll see you in court. And this time, you won't get to rewrite the ending. We posted the video. It hit 100,000 views in under 3 hours. The local sheriff's office issued a statement acknowledging they were monitoring the situation. Our kids, for the first time in days, actually laughed. That night, as we sat by the fire, I stared out across the water. Silver Pines looked darker than usual. No lights, no speakers, no megaphones, just silence, and the feeling that something big was coming next. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was scared. No, fear had long since burned itself out and hardened into something else, but because I was wired, focused. You can tell when someone's gearing up for a last move. Everything goes quiet, movements sharpen, the tension goes underground. That's where Silver Pines was now. They weren't sending drones or blasting music anymore. They were planning, and sure enough, by mid-morning, it came. Carol called. Her voice was calm but clipped, like she was holding back the urge to laugh. They filed the injunction. I didn't even blink. What grounds? You'll love this. Visual encroachment causing emotional and communal distress to HOA residents. I waited. And it was filed as an emergency measure. They're claiming your campfire poses an imminent psychological hazard to the community. I looked over at our campfire. A couple of marshmallow sticks were still resting on a rock nearby. The kids were building a mud fort out of pine bark and lake water. Sounds terrifying. I'm heading to the courthouse now, Carol said. And I'm bringing everything. That included the leaked meeting minutes, the drone footage, the audio from the megaphone, and the sheriff's original statement. She also mentioned she'd subpoenaed HOA financials. Just in case, she said. I liked her style. By noon, we were in the county courthouse, standing behind Carol in the hearing room. On the other side sat Karen Morrison in a navy blue blazer that probably cost more than my truck, flanked by Victor the loafer's lawyer and 2 HOA board members who looked like they'd been dragged out of a wine tasting against their will. The judge, a woman in her 60s with wire-frame glasses and an expression like granite, glanced down at the file in front of her. I've reviewed the emergency injunction request, she said. You're telling me this family's recreational camping activity constitutes an immediate threat to the emotional well-being of your community? Karen cleared her throat. It's not just emotional. The open flame was cleared by the fire department. Carol interrupted. With permits. Also, the family in question is fully outside the HOA's legal boundaries. Karen tried to pivot, but it affects our homeowners. Their view is obstructed. The peace is disturbed. Carol stepped forward and handed the judge a packet. Here's the HOA's own documentation obtained through legal means. You'll see they've internally conspired to target neighboring properties that are outside their jurisdiction. They've also used surveillance drones, amplified audio harassment, and have disseminated defamatory statements online, including calling my client a squatter on land he owns outright. Karen opened her mouth, but the judge raised a hand. Ms. Morrison, is any of this documentation inaccurate? Karen's mouth worked, but no sound came out. The judge continued. Is it true you filed a false police report earlier this week? Karen sputtered. I thought it was common property. It was not. The courtroom was dead silent. The judge turned to Victor. You submitted this injunction? Victor straightened in his seat. Yes, Your Honor, at the board's request. Well, Mr. Denton, this was a waste of court time. This injunction is not only denied, it borders on malicious litigation. Karen visibly flinched. One of the board members next to her leaned away slightly. The judge wasn't finished. I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for review under Oregon's false report and privacy violation statutes. Ms. Edwards, please submit the drone footage and your compiled evidence. Carol gave a short, satisfied nod. The judge tapped her gavel once, stood, and walked out without another word. I exhaled slowly. Kate reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. Ella susurró. Ganemos? I whispered back. We're just getting started. Outside the courthouse, the Channel 8 van was already parked. They'd heard about the hearing and were eager to get a statement. I let Carol do most of the talking. She was better at the sound bites, but I made one thing clear on camera. This was never just about camping. This is about boundaries, legal ones, personal ones. You don't get to harass people because you don't like how they live. That's not a community. That's a dictatorship. By evening, the clip was running on the local broadcast and spreading online again. The public turned harder. Now it wasn't just support. It was outrage. Former HOA residents from other states began posting their own videos under the hashtag #CampFreeOrStayMad. Karen's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. And in the darkening quiet of our lakeside camp, with the fire crackling and the kids finally asleep, I could feel it shift. They hadn't just lost, they were unraveling. By the next morning, Silver Pines wasn't just unraveling, it was cannibalizing itself. It started with an anonymous email to Carol's office, see to our inbox. The subject line read simply, Whistleblower. The body of the message claimed to be from a current member of the HOA board. They didn't name themselves, but what they attached spoke volumes. A 20-page internal email chain between board members discussing containment strategies for the PR fallout. One email, sent by Karen herself, included the line, if we don't isolate this now, we'll be facing not just civil litigation, but liability from previous shoreline claims. In plain terms, they were worried that our case might reopen old wounds, cases from years back where Karen had tried similar visual zone nonsense with other property owners. Cases that had been quietly dropped, settled out of court, or in one instance, allegedly resolved through verbal agreement. That one reeked of intimidation. Carol lit up like a bonfire. She moved fast. We filed an amended lawsuit naming Karen Morrison personally, along with the HOA as a corporate entity. The charges included harassment, false reporting, illegal surveillance, defamation, and obstruction of lawful land use. Carol also added pattern of misconduct, citing 3 additional testimonies from past neighbors who now felt emboldened to speak. Meanwhile, public sentiment continued to tilt, and then nosedive, against Karen and her cronies. Kate's latest post, titled The HOA Tried to Break Us, Here's What They Didn't Expect, went viral faster than anything we'd seen yet. It had clips from the court hearing, before and after aerial images showing how far their claims strayed from reality, and a voiceover from Kate that was part fury, part weary defiance. People loved it, and they hated Karen. Then came the real kicker. The DA filed charges, misdemeanor false reporting, Class A, for the police call she made on our family during the first night. They cited the body cam footage from the sheriff's deputy, the maps, the HOA minutes, and her own conflicting statements on record. The HOA released a panicked statement, distancing themselves from Karen, calling her actions unauthorized and misaligned with the values of Silver Pines. Suddenly, the same people who stood on their patios cheering on her drone war were falling silent. 2 days later, Karen was removed as HOA president, not resigned, removed. An emergency board meeting was called, and based on what the whistleblower told us, the vote was nearly unanimous. The only holdout? Victor Denton, her beloved attorney, who found himself replaced less than 24 hours later by a sleepy-looking local firm that hadn't been involved in the mess. Silver Pines was now on fire, and we weren't the ones holding the matches. But we weren't finished. Carol proposed a public settlement offer to be announced at a press conference, not just to resolve our case, but to create legal precedent against these so-called visual harmony expansions. A formal declaration of no HOA authority beyond property lines, a line in the sand, backed by case law. The press conference was set for the next weekend at our lakefront campsite. Carol made sure every local outlet was invited. Even a couple of national reporters RSVP'd. Kate looked around that morning and said, "Think we should clean up the marshmallow sticks?" "Leave them," I said. "Let them see exactly what the crime scene looks like." So we set up a table by the fire ring. I wore my old fire department jacket, mostly for the symbolism. Kate had the kids wear shirts they'd made with permanent marker. Camp Free. Private land. Public outrage. Stay Mad. HOA. The press came. So did neighbors, supporters, even a few folks from nearby counties who had their own HOA war stories. Carol gave the speech of her life, concise, biting, and backed by law. When I spoke, I kept it short. This place is ours. Not because we bought it, not because we fought for it, but because we refuse to give it up to people who think rules give them the right to bully. If you want to look at our fire pit and feel offended, you're free to blink. That clip made it to Good Morning America. That night, back by the campfire as the stars came out and the lake finally lay still, Kate leaned into me. "So what do we do next?" I smiled. "I think we invite everyone back next year." 6 months later, the lake was quieter than it had been in years, but not because people had stopped showing up. In fact, more people were coming now than ever before. Not to Silver Pines, no. That community was still there, shrinking, silent, restructured, and from what I heard, operating under a newly drafted charter that strictly forbade the HOA from interacting with non-members in any capacity. Karen Morrison was long gone. Her name a cautionary tale in local real estate circles. Rumor had it she'd moved to Arizona. Even there, I imagined she was furiously scanning the horizon for tents that offended her view. No, the people weren't coming for Silver Pines anymore. They were coming for us. It started as a few emails, folks asking if they could visit the spot from the videos. A couple from Idaho who'd watched our whole story unfold online asked if they could come camp somewhere nearby just to feel the freedom. A retired judge from Eugene drove up one weekend with a bottle of bourbon and asked to shake my hand. I offered him coffee instead. He stayed for s'mores. That gave Kate the idea. Not a business, not a campground, but a tradition. We called it the Freedom Camp Weekend. The first one wasn't even planned. Just a few families who'd followed our story, camping on the edge of our 20-acre plot with permission. We set up fire rings, swapped stories, shared meals, and toasted to the strange, wonderful fact that standing your ground could sometimes actually work. The second one? That was a festival. We printed shirts. We set up a stage. Local musicians came out to play lakeside. Carol gave a keynote speech about property rights, and a couple of state representatives even showed up, not for press, just to say, "Right on." James built a homemade slingshot range for the kids. Ella taught a group of toddlers how to roast the perfect marshmallow. I installed solar lanterns all around the camp ring. And at the center of it all, the fire pit. The same one Karen had tried to shut down. We called it Camp Zero. I installed a sign behind it, carved into polished cedar. It read, "Private Lakefront, not for HOA visitors. Camp Free or Stay Mad." People loved it. News outlets returned to cover the second Freedom Camp. It made the front page of the Oregonian and a segment on NPR. One journalist even joked that we'd become the Rosa Parks of recreational land use. I don't know about that, but I do know this. We never asked for a fight. We just refused to back down when someone decided our piece was offensive. Kate kept filming, editing, documenting everything. Her YouTube channel, originally called Lake Life and dedicated to fishing and DIY projects, had rebranded itself into Camp Free Chronicles. It grew fast. Interviews, law explainers, drone reviews, even HOA horror story submissions from across the country. Her video on how to legally torch HOA claims hit over 1 million views. People wanted more than entertainment. They wanted a blueprint. And we gave it to them. As for me, I still woke up early, made coffee over the fire, and watched the lake in that perfect moment before the wind wakes up. Sometimes I thought about how easily it could have gone the other way. If we hadn't filmed, if we'd backed down, if we'd accepted that someone else's comfort mattered more than our rights. But we didn't. And now, the fire's still burning. Not just in our pit, but in people who watched and realized you don't have to move just because someone tells you to.